Hello and welcome to this special edition on I24 News. Israel's Prime Minister has ruled out a US-backed proposal for a ceasefire with Hezbollah. Benjamin Netanyahu has just arrived in New York ahead of his speech to the UN General Assembly. The IDF says it has killed today the head of Hezbollah's air division in a precision strike on an apartment in Beirut. Let's get the latest on that now with our Zach Anders, who joins us from Israel's northern border. Zach, let's start with what happened in Beirut this afternoon. Then tell us a bit more about the target of that strike.
It's believed to be one of Hezbollah's air commanders, and already media picking up this around the world, saying a Hezbollah Air Force commander. We got to remember that Hezbollah does not have an air force. They have a sizable drone arsenal. We continue to see that on display here in the north, although over the last 3 days, considerably less drone attacks coming from Hezbollah as they continue to get hit. It's believed through what I understand that some of these drone launch points are more visible targets for the IDF and have been an emphasis of the IDF campaign throughout southern Lebanon. So this is a commander of one of Hezbollah's drone units, and in this strike in Beirut, again, this is the 6th time we've seen a strike in Beirut in the last 11 months. We're hearing reports out of Lebanese channels that some 2 dead, 15 injured in this strike on a lone apartment complex there.
And Hezbollah's air division has been pretty busy today. No peace for the residents of northern Israel, particularly people in the city of Akko.
Yeah, that's right. As we saw a really large attack, 45 rockets. These attacks throughout the last 11 months have been usually contained to a dozen or less rockets in each volley. Now we're seeing these, and we're describing them in dozens of rockets in each volley. The IDF tells me 45 into the Akko area. A few hours later, into the Safad area, 2 alarms, actually consecutive alarms around Safad within an hour of each other. We could see it from our location here in Kiryat Shmona, more than 20 interceptions above Safad, and we're getting preliminary reports of some falls in Rosh Pina as well. No considerable reports of casualties late this evening after these attacks. They were, however, again, like I was saying earlier, large volleys of these rockets in both areas.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Andrews there up at Israel's northern border. Well, as you heard there, Israel has rejected a joint French-US proposal for a ceasefire with Hezbollah. The proposal was backed by a dozen other countries, including the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. It calls for an immediate 21-day ceasefire. It doesn't mention Hezbollah, though. Here with me in the studio, Ruth Wasserman-Lander is a former member of the Knesset and a research fellow at the Misgav Institute for Strategic Affairs. Thank you for joining us, Ruth.
Very welcome.
We're also joined in the studio by our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osiran. So, Ruth, this statement put forward by the United States and France, it talks about a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. It does not mention the word Hezbollah once.
What can I say? First of all, the war is not against Lebanon, and neither the IDF nor the Israeli government, be it what may, does not have anything against the Lebanese people. Second of all, where were all these countries when Israel was incessantly bombarded for 11 whole months, absolutely in a surreal manner, which no other country in the entire universe would have accepted, not even one rocket, let alone thousands and thousands of rockets, let alone 60, 70,000 displaced persons, children not going to their own schools, mothers and fathers not being able to work, businesses going down the drain, farms actually losing everything that they've grown. Absolutely horrific situation, unsustainable, and cannot be accepted. And the Israeli public had so much fury against the government for not responding all this time. There was so much restraint. It cannot possibly be asked of Israel to show more restraint. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and only for the purpose of moving the Hezbollah to a position which was originally asked by the United Nations. And it didn't, of course, listen.
And Ariel, there was some confusion this morning, wasn't there, about whether or not Israel would accept that ceasefire proposal before Benjamin Netanyahu got on an aeroplane and flew off to New York.
Well, a spokesperson for the government said that they deny the reports that Israel has agreed to it. Israel has not yet said officially what its stance is on this proposal, but I want to connect to what you said earlier, that Hezbollah isn't, the word Hezbollah isn't mentioned in this proposal, but Israel is not at war with Lebanon. In fact, it's not Lebanon who is firing rockets. Well, it assumes that Lebanon
can stop the rocket fire, doesn't it?
Yes, but if you call for a ceasefire between two sides and one of the sides isn't firing, so this is basically not acknowledging, or worse than that, it's normalizing the existence of terror groups that undermine the sovereignty of countries, but that they aren't held accountable. This is what the international community is doing. It's normalizing this, and just
yeah, sure.
And but what is more interesting, that this proposal not only calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon and to give diplomatic time for implementing a resolution by the UN Security Council from 18 years ago, but it's also saying that it calls for the implementation of the UN Security Council resolution on a ceasefire in Gaza. This text ties the two together now.
Which is what Hezbollah has been trying to do.
Which is what Hezbollah has been trying to do, but the Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesperson denied that there was a direct linkage between the two fronts. And so this does cause some, I think, confusion regarding to how much the sides are tying the two together.
Ruth, I mean, the Americans, they want this ceasefire. They want the 21-day ceasefire. What if they decide to start slowing weapons supplies or halting them altogether and doing something similar that they did to Israel during the war with Hamas?
So first of all, they've already declared that they're stopping some supplies, which is something that an ally cannot and should not do. And I think it's an act of, I don't want to say a very difficult word, but it's very surprising at this point when Israel is really attacked on all these fronts. And very clearly the Americans have all the intelligence, and they clearly understand that a designated terror organization like Hezbollah, and God knows that they know what they did against Americans, is not exactly one's picture of purity and innocence. It's beyond my comprehension. I mean, with all respect to the elections, there's a right and a wrong.
The American election.
Exactly.
Okay, Ruth, for now, hold that thought. All right, we're going to get a recap of today's events. Ariel has this report.
Another targeted Israeli airstrike in Hezbollah's Beirut stronghold, its fourth in a week. The IDF said it eliminated Mohammed Hossein Srour, commander of Hezbollah's aerial forces. The Lebanese Health Ministry said 2 people were killed in the strike. Hezbollah did not comment. Throughout Thursday, Israel targeted dozens of Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. This included 8 crossings along the Syria-Lebanon border used by Hezbollah to transfer weapons. Dozens of people were killed across Lebanon, according to local authorities, including 23 people in a building housing Syrian families.
Lebanon today is victim to an enemy that is using electronic, cyber, sea and air attacks against us that could turn into a ground attack and set the stage for an all-out regional war. I hope to return to my country armed with your explicit stance, calling for the cessation of this aggression out of respect for the sovereignty and safety of my country.
Meanwhile, the terror group that has undermined Lebanon's sovereignty fired dozens of rockets at communities in the upper and western Galilee. There were no injuries. In some areas, the alert only comes after the rockets hit. Amid tensions of a wider escalation, the IDF wrapped up another drill, simulating a ground offensive in Lebanon.
We have entered a new phase of the campaign, and we are now in Operation Northern Arrows. The operation began with a significant blow to Hezbollah's capabilities, focusing on their firepower capabilities, and a very significant hit on the organization's commanders and operatives. Facing this, we need to change the security situation. We must be fully prepared for maneuvers and action.
In an attempt to avoid such a scenario, the United States and France and some of their allies issued a proposal for an immediate ceasefire.
A diplomatic solution is indeed possible. In recent days, we've worked with our American partners on a temporary ceasefire platform of 21 days to allow for negotiations. We are counting on both parties to accept it without delay in order to protect civilian populations and allow for diplomatic negotiations to begin.
Reports of an expected ceasefire in the coming hours were received with anger from right-wing coalition members and northern mayors, calling it, quote, a fatal mistake. This prompted the Netanyahu government to deny the reports, saying Israel will continue to fight Hezbollah with full force.
The reports about a ceasefire being already agreed are not accurate. The Prime Minister's reiterated that, yes, of course, Israel is open to diplomacy, as we have been. It's always our go-to option. But Israel has yet to respond to this particular American-French proposal.
But Lebanese civilians are not waiting for diplomacy, with hundreds of thousands evacuating southern Lebanon. However, they weren't always met with open arms. Residents of North Lebanon's Tripoli forced evacuees from southern Lebanon to tear pro-Hezbollah and Nasrallah stickers off their cars as they entered the predominantly Sunni city. Also in eastern Lebanon, Zahle, locals of the majority Christian city in the Bekaa Valley were seen kicking out evacuees from the south. A clear indication that not all Lebanese are rallying around Hezbollah in its escalating war against Israel.
Well, let's head back to northern Israel. We're joined by Major Shadi Khalul. He's a Hezbollah expert and a former security zone officer in South Lebanon. He's also the founder and president of the Galilee Aramaic Center. Great to have you with us again, Shadi. Good to see you. I want to ask you, first of all, because we've had, extensive military action against Hezbollah over the last couple of weeks. Can you give us an idea of just how much damage the IDF has managed to inflict on the terrorist group?
Good evening, Laura. I can tell you that the damage in the other side is great, and it's very, very substantial damage on the Hezbollah side. And we attacked a major, as everyone knows, a major operatives and leaders of that terrorist organization. We actually attacked the as well control and communication command and many other missile facilities that they have. And we have actually a big success in attacking with a pager. If we do it, we don't know who did it, but as they say, Israel did it with attacking a Hezbollah operative when pager attacks. And it's eliminating many operatives at one time, according to some says 3,000 at once, and we should continue this success.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, Shadi, because
this threat.
That's what I want to ask you, because there's a lot of pressure on Israel to accept this 21-day ceasefire from its allies. There is some hesitation, though, whether Hezbollah has unleashed its full capabilities yet. Do you think Israel should continue despite the risks? Do you?
Laura, we already almost 12 months away from our homes here in the north. We are evacuated for almost 12 months. People are suffering here in the northern communities, where people and Israeli citizens at all are suffering for 12 months. We have a huge damage on our economic activities. We have people who are bankrupt, people who are actually lost their social life, education, agriculture, businesses. And at the end of 12 months, we have actually, we have the opportunity now to eliminate this threat from our borders and let our people back. Stopping now means we lost this war.
Okay.
And if we don't now take advantage of what we have succeeded and stop, means we did nothing, and we lost. And I urge my Israeli leaders here and Israeli military leaders to continue and force the UN resolution 1559 and 1701. 1701 alone doesn't work. It's relevant. We need 1559, which completed, which is disarming Hezbollah from the weapon and bring peace for Lebanese and Israelis and the region alike. And we request the international community, Macron and Biden and Netanyahu and all the other leaders who care for Israel, Lebanon and responsible to do those two resolutions.
Okay, Shadi, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but we got the gist of it. Thank you very much indeed, Major Shadi Khalul, there up in the north of Israel. Ruth and Ariel still with me in the studio. Ruth, do you agree with that? Then do you think that Israel should continue despite the risk?
Absolutely. It's shocking that leaders of the free world are calling on Israel to cease fire. It's absolutely shocking. I want to see one rocket thrown at any of those countries and them not responding. It is absolutely shocking, and there is no way that they can look at the UN calling for those two resolutions that had not been fulfilled for 18 whole years. UNIFIL had been paid for and sitting, the international multinational force, the UN force, sitting in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, and doing absolutely nothing to prevent the Hezbollah from literally overlooking the living rooms of Israeli villages. And then Israel, after almost 12 months of incessant bombardments on our civilians, then when the second we respond, they ask us to consider a ceasefire. It is shocking and really lacks the courage that I expect to see of true leadership in the international arena.
Ariel, real quick, because Israel has said that it has goals. It wants to restore its citizens to the north, and it wants Hezbollah to go back north beyond the Litani River, and it won't accept anything less than that. Given what we know about Hezbollah, is there any chance that Nasrallah would accept those conditions?
If it were only up to him, I'd say not, but it's not just up to him. He's a proxy of Iran, and Iran has its own considerations to take into place regarding this. That's why these are crucial days for the Lebanese front, during which Hezbollah and its backers in Tehran are going to have to make a decision whether this current discrepancy between Israel's full-scale war-like pace in its targeting of Hezbollah sites all across Lebanon. It does not match what Hezbollah is bringing to the table against Israel right now, and it's continuing to exact a price from them, further degrading their capabilities. And eventually it will stop being cost-effective for them, even though they're in this war of attrition kind of mindset. Israel has ramped up the strikes, and this discrepancy is forcing, or will force, Hezbollah with its Iranian backers to make an official decision. Just with the French President Emmanuel Macron saying after last week's Hezbollah pager explosions, "I stand beside Lebanon." This just shows how a terror organization taking over a state has been normalized by the international community, and we're seeing this hypocrisy come out in full force with this current proposal.
We will speak a bit more about Monsieur le Président later in the programme when we're joined by the former ambassador to France. But for now, thank you both. Well, how many missiles does Hezbollah have exactly left in its arsenal? Could Israel withhold a sustained assault by the group? Our Fabio Shapiro looks at Hezbollah's estimated capabilities.
This week, Hezbollah shot its first ballistic missile at Tel Aviv, coming as the IDF upped its attacks against the terrorist group.
You hear the jets overhead. We have been striking all day. This is both to prepare the ground for your possible entry and to continue degrading Hezbollah. Today, Hezbollah expanded its range of fire, and later today, they will receive a very strong response. Prepare yourselves.
The missile launched is an escalation from the previous Hezbollah attacks. Since October 8th, the group has mainly used rockets to attack northern Israel, launching an estimated 8,000. But the Iranian proxy possesses a large variety of firepower,
including long-range cruise missiles, heavyweight rocket with 1,000-kilo warhead. This is the same type of rocket that was used in the Majd al-Shams attack that killed 12 innocent children. We also struck a short and medium-range rockets and UAVs, all capable of attacking deep inside Israeli territory and causing major damage to civilian towns and cities.
The IDF and the CIA estimate that beside around 50,000 combatants, Hezbollah has an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets, capable of hitting all areas of Israel. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that the terror group has over 100,000 short and long-range rockets, over 20,000 short-range unguided ballistic missiles, over 150 short-range guided ballistic missiles, and over 10 intermediate-range unguided ballistic missiles, making its capabilities 20 to 33 times larger than Hamas's, besides having a longer range of reach. But it seems both terror groups have a similar way of storing their firepower.
In these images, you can see how Hezbollah hides long-range rockets with range of hundreds of kilometers inside the attic of a house in the heart of Khumin al-Takhta village in southern Lebanon. You can see here that the rocket is stored on an hydraulic system and is prepared for a launch out of an opening in the roof, directed at the communities in northern Israel. And more than that, under this attic, a family lives and serves as a human shield for Hezbollah.
Much of this military growth is linked to Hezbollah's main supporter and weapons supplier, Iran, which provides the group with new missile systems such as their Almas-3 anti-tank missile, but also providing guidance systems to upgrade Hezbollah's older systems. The IDF claimed to have hit over 1,600 Hezbollah targets in Lebanon in the last few days, many of them rocket and missile storage facilities. Reports from Israel's Channel 12 claim that the strikes resulted in the destruction of over 50% of Hezbollah capabilities, but military sources believe this is an exaggeration. The IDF said it could not verify the percentages and the data given by the network. Yet, many believe the blow was a significant one.
A few words about the enemy. Hezbollah today is not the same Hezbollah we knew a week ago. It has suffered a sequence of blows to its command and control, its fighters, and the means to fight. These are all severe blows. I trust the IDF and everything it does, and we have more strikes ready.
As Israel already sees the possibility of a ground invasion into Lebanon as a reality, and over 60,000 Israelis await to return home, a much larger challenge can be expected on the way to southern Lebanon's Litani River.
And there has been an exodus of people out of southern Lebanon in recent days, some heading north, while, according to security sources in Syria, more than 22,000 people have now crossed the border from Lebanon into Syria. We're joined now by Omar Abu Layla. He's the executive director of Deir ez-Zor 24. Great to have you with us, Omar. And tell me, who exactly then is crossing the border? Are these Lebanese civilians? Are they Hezbollah fighters? Are they Syrian refugees from the civil war? Give me an idea of who we're talking about here.
Thank you so much, Laura, for having me again. We talk about three parts who they cross the border. Many Syrians left Lebanon because of the strikes as well, Syrian civilians, also Lebanese civilians, and limited number of Hezbollah and other militia leaders left for Damascus or other Syrian province to hide there because they still surprised the strikes, what happened in Lebanon in the past 3-4 days left them in shock. So they try to hide in somewhere out of Lebanon, at least for this period, because we're talking about like top leaders of Hezbollah were assassinated or killed in the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks, including Radwan unit force leaders and other leaders as well. Every couple of hours, we hear about some of them. So those guys who are leaders of Hezbollah militia or other militia, they left for Damascus or other Syrian province just to hide for this period at least.
Ah, okay. Now we know, don't we, the role that Hezbollah played in the Syrian civil war. They fought on the side of President Assad. They murdered many Syrian Arabs. What kind of welcome are their supporters and their fighters getting in Syria?
Yeah, this is a very good question, Laura, because like I don't blame the Syrian people who they were or who they are under the Assad control regime. Like they cannot express exactly how they hit Hezbollah and this militia. Other side, you could just look not only in Syria, look at the Middle East, all the Middle East since 5 days. They are celebrating. They're so happy on what's going on against Hezbollah, and they remembering Hezbollah on its crimes in Syria since 2011. Look what you have done in Syria against civilians when you killed women, children, young guys, old people. Look what's going on against you. We are not talking about the civilians in Lebanon. We're talking about this militia. And all the Arab countries now celebrating what Hezbollah is facing now, because it's the same scenario this militia was using it against us in Syria since 2011. So people hate Hezbollah in Syria. Hezbollah, one of the main criminals who did these crimes against Syrians. We don't forget it, absolutely. And people in the area or region under Assad control, they cannot express these feelings or what they wanted to say, opinions, because and somehow they will be in jail or they will be killed.
They're still living under Assad, of course. And real quick, Omar, because we're running out of time, but how active is the Assad regime in facilitating attacks on Israel? Is it allowing Iraqi militia, for example, to use Syrian airspace?
Yeah, Bashar Assad doesn't care about anything related to the region, only to remain in power. Look at the Iraqi militia yesterday and the day before. They hit or they launched rocket targets Eilat. And before all this happened from inside Syria and on the border with Syria. So these militia, Hezbollah militia and Iraqi militia, other militia, moving free between three Arabic capitals, between Baghdad, Damascus, and Beirut. And they do what they want. Also, it's the price that they spend it for Bashar al-Assad since 2011. That's why he cannot do anything against them to limit them or to just stop them to attack against Israel or against even some other countries, put them under threat like Jordan or other countries.
Omar, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Omar Abu Layla there.
Thank you.
Well, time for us to take a short break. When we come back, the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has told the UN General Assembly in New York that Israel does not deserve to be a member. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu arrived ahead of his speech tomorrow. We'll have more on all of that next. Stay with us.
Sail for the benefit of the victims of October 7th, 2023, supported by the Karen Hayazad. With renowned artists from all over the world on Monday, October 7th, 2024. View the complete catalog and access remote purchase orders on aspacefineart.com and Karen-Hayasad.fr.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Can you hear?
Welcome back. The Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has been delivering his remarks to the UN General Assembly in New York, and he claimed Israel did not deserve to be a member of the organisation. Abbas, who has consistently ranked below Hamas in terms of popularity among Palestinians in both Gaza and the West Bank, went on to list his 12 demands from the international community for a post-war Gaza. Here's a couple of them.
The state of Palestine must shoulder its responsibilities over the Gaza Strip and impose full authority and jurisdiction on it, including control over border checkpoints, especially the Rafah international crossing between Egypt and Palestine, as part of a comprehensive plan. This arrangement existed before and must return to the way it was. Seventh, within the framework of comprehensive national reform, a process we are currently undertaking with the support and gratitude of many countries. We will hopefully continue this process to its conclusion. We will rebuild our infrastructure and state institutions destroyed by Israel, revive the economy, establish sustainable development, and reconstruct the Gaza Strip. We will also hold the State of Israel fully responsible for these damages. Eighth, the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian government, and the PLO, the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, will have authority over all Palestinian territories, including the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, as stipulated by international law. We are not asking for more, but we will not accept any less.
Ruth Weissman-Land, a former diplomat, former member of Knesset, and a research fellow at the Misgav Institute for Strategic Affairs, is with us. So, Ruth, no big surprises from Abbas there. He says he wants a UN resolution that would force Israel to allow him to visit Gaza. I mean, Israel presumably doesn't want him to go there. I'm not sure the Palestinians would be too keen either, looking at the polls anyway.
I don't mean any disrespect, but I think his life would be quite endangered by the Hamas and not by the Israeli IDF in the Gaza Strip. In fact, several good months ago, there was an attempt to place the head of Hamullahs, big families, as some kind of an authority in Gaza. They were murdered very few days after by the Hamas operatives and thugs. And I fear that that's exactly what's going to happen to Mahmoud Abbas if he does insist on going to visit the Gaza Strip. In fact, it could be extremely embarrassing for him that he would have to be, in fact, supported or even protected by the Israeli IDF. Because
Israeli bodyguards, wouldn't be a great look for him, would it?
It's absolutely an insane notion, but
as we keep being told, there's no alternative to Abbas when it comes to an alternative Palestinian leadership.
No, there's no alternative to a Palestinian leadership, in my humble opinion. And the reason for that, the way that I see it, one of the main reasons, because there's not only one, is the terrible indoctrination and incitement that has been fed to the Palestinian people, a little bit differently in the Gaza and the West Bank, but definitely in both of those regions. And the internationally recognized Mahmoud Abbas, the internationally recognized leader of the Palestinian people, in fact, is being undermined by the Islamic Republic of Iran, by the fact that they are strengthening the Hamas in the West Bank and trying to overthrow him. So I would definitely insist on having them solve their problems before they offer to take over the Gaza Strip and create further chaos, allowing further incitement and indoctrination, and permitting and encouraging rape, massacres, burnings, beheadings, and murder that has happened on October 7th.
OK, Ruth, for now, thank you. Well, let's go to New York, because our senior US correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, is at UN headquarters. And it was a long speech, Mike. As you pointed out, no Holocaust denial this time around.
I guess that's a plus. Also 26 minutes and not a single mention of Hamas either. Mahmoud Abbas pointing out a number of plans that he has, certainly literally a laundry list, a 12-step day after list for what he hopes or demands will transpire in Gaza following Hamas's rule there, but also the airing of some old grievances, calling for Israel to be ejected from the United Nations, saying it doesn't qualify as a state to begin with, using some abstract political argument from the partition plan and the acceptance of it, and some provisions that never came into effect. These are things that I think analysts and experts have pointed out that aren't going to, quote unquote, help free Palestine, that aren't going to advance a political process in any way, that aren't going to bring any kind of relief to his population. So in that respect, minus the Holocaust denialism that was absent from his speech today, this was pretty much standard Mahmoud Abbas here at the UN General Assembly. There were some things that maybe Prime Minister Netanyahu will address tomorrow in terms of Abbas calling the Temple Mount exclusive property of Muslims. He also, Abbas referring to Israel as a terrorist state, referring to Itamar Ben-Gvir, the controversial Israeli Minister of Security, as a terrorist as well. Abbas, not so fiery at this point, 80-some years old, hobbled, coming to the end of his tenure, but still trying to do what he can to get his message across. Obviously was applauded when he took the stage, applauded when he left the stage, but in terms of, again, the lasting impact from these types of speeches, a lasting impact from any kind of new policy proposals, game-changing, game-shaping proposals, they're simply absent once again, and again, just a kind of a wasted opportunity there on the global stage, I think, for Mahmoud Abbas.
And the Israeli Prime Minister has now arrived in New York. One of the first things he did was deny that Israel will accept that US-backed proposal for a ceasefire with Hezbollah. But how much pressure, Mike, is Netanyahu going to be under from the Americans to accept that ceasefire?
I think it's or open to interpretation a little bit, Laura. I'm not sure he outright denied that it'll fall in line with that ceasefire request, but at least for the time being, there's business to take care of there in Lebanon in terms of trying to take out additional Hezbollah commanders, in terms of trying to take out additional missile launch sites. There's no reason, I think, Netanyahu sees with the momentum on Israel's side right now and Hezbollah under extreme pressure with its leadership ladder being taken out, essentially, that he needs to suddenly fall in line with this 3-week ceasefire proposal. Doesn't mean he won't in a couple days. It doesn't mean he won't in a week. But in the meantime, with momentum on his side, I just don't think, even under pressure from the United States, that he saw the need to just jump headfirst into this ceasefire that would allow Hezbollah to regroup. And even if he does accept it, eventually, I think it'll be for a shorter term under different parameters. 3 weeks will probably allow Hezbollah to regroup a little bit and eventually expand the war or expand the hostilities even further. Israel keeps pointing this out time and time again. You let it get the job done, it eventually cuts down on the time of hostilities and the casualties. You expand the war and not let it finish the job, well, it just drags things out even further. I'm sure he'll make that point directly to U.S. officials, may even make it on the podium here at the UN General Assembly tomorrow morning.
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Wagenheim there at the UN headquarters in New York. And France has been at the forefront of calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, not Israel and Hezbollah. Earlier this week, President Emmanuel Macron also made a speech expressing sympathy for Lebanese civilians in the current war. Again, he didn't mention Hezbollah. He also failed to mention Israeli civilians, tens of thousands of whom have been displaced from the north. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Avi Pazner. He's the former Israeli ambassador to France. Great to have you with us, Avi. So tell me, Laura, you should know, why are the French so blind when it comes to acknowledging the very existence of Hezbollah?
You know, you put your finger on a very strange psychological problem, I believe. France and President Macron still live in the 30s and the 40s when Lebanon was a French protectorate, when there was a moderate Christian majority, by the way, French-speaking Christian majority. You know, a very nice country, and Beirut used to be called the Paris of the Middle East. But times have changed. And Macron still lives in the past. And the very fact that he addressed the Lebanese people surrounded by French and Lebanese flags did not mention not only the existence of Hezbollah, but the fact that Hezbollah on the 8th of October opened the war against Israel, did not mention in one sentence the 80,000 Israeli refugees in their own country. I mean, this was an incredible speech by President Macron, completely unrealistic. I believe that certainly the Hezbollah must have liked it, but it did not help to solve the situation and put France solidly in the pro-Lebanese, I would say in parentheses, pro-Hezbollah camp.
Well, I remember, Avi, a few years ago when there was that terrible port explosion in Beirut. President Macron was one of the first to jet off there and stroll around Beirut and express his solidarity. Again, he didn't talk about Hezbollah, and still no one has been brought to justice for that deadly explosion. But, I mean, do you think that he believes he can effect some change in Lebanon, or is he just simply taking the opportunity to distract from his own very large political problems at home?
You're absolutely right. Macron has a lot of political problems. He just put together a government where his party does not have a majority. France has extremely difficult social and economical problem. And so he puts himself in the role of peacemaker. But you know, Laura, you cannot make peace only by siding with one side. It's very nice that you want to play a role. Like, for example, the United States is trying to play a role, trying to advance a ceasefire. But here, Macron has done exactly the opposite. He has sided with one side against the other. Meaning, and by the way, it comes days after France voted in the General Assembly for a resolution calling on an arms embargo against Israel. France was about the very lonely European states who voted that way. So I am very sorry to see that new line of Macron. I think it comes because of his problems at home with a big Muslim minority in France, which plays a political role. And I think that this deviation of a neutral policy by France is something that Israel has to note, and that we have to think when we engage in the future in France about its activities of peacemaker in the Middle East.
Well, yes, you're right. And France, of course, has had its own very painful battles with jihadism and Islamist terror. We remember the attacks in Paris, of course, Nice, and many French cities have been attacked by jihadists. President Macron doesn't seem to see any link between what's happening here and what's happening there. Just where do you see the relationship going between France and Israel in the future? Do you think it will get worse?
Look, we have to make an effort, Laura. We have to make an effort to better explain our policy. You know, the new French Prime Minister Barnier has always adopted a line sympathetic to Israel. We have many friends in the French Parliament, in the French society, and I think we have to make an effort. And even with the right wing of the French politics, we have to be able to engage also in a dialogue with the right in France, and to put pressure on Macron to abandon this line, which I believe is also part of the rising power of the far left in France. You know, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the leader of the France Insoumise, has adopted a very violent anti-Israel, I may even say anti-Semitic line.
Well, I think it's pro-Hamas, I would go as far to say.
absolutely, siding with Hamas openly, siding with Hamas, a terrorist organization recognized as such by the French, siding with Hamas, siding with Hezbollah. And I believe that here there are internal reasons in France why Macron has changed his policy. And remember, it is the same Macron who came after the 7th of October to Israel and advocated the formation of an international coalition against terrorism. It's the same Macron. Something has changed here, and I believe it is the influence of the Islamist community in France and the political changes that Macron brought on himself, because he dissolved the parliament and he created this catastrophic political situation for himself, and now he's trying somehow to win the vote of the Islamists and the Arabs in France. I am not sure that he will succeed, because Mélenchon is much more appealing to them because he's much more extremist. So I don't think he will succeed. And I believe we have to make the maximum effort in explaining Israel to those French who love Israel and who will support Israel.
Okay, Avi. Thank you very much. Avi Pazner. Merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Merci beaucoup à vous.
And Ruth Wasserman-Land is with me in the studio. And Ruth, just speaking more broadly, you know, the relationship with France is under a lot of pressure right now. Also, Germany, the UK. We've got Prime Minister Netanyahu at the UN this week. So speaking more broadly about international relations, are you worried as an Israeli about where Israel's allies, its friendships are going?
First, let's say that I am indeed worried. It's quite impossible to live in Israel at this moment and not be worried, whether it's about our children and their well-being, about the future of this country, and of course about the security situation, and the fact that many of our allies in the international arena are not courageous enough to take the right stand. However, having said that, I think that Israel is, or should, be more prominent in making the case that this is, and it's not doing it in my humble opinion, that this is not an Israeli-Arab war. It's not a Hamas or Gaza or an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not an Israel-Lebanon war. It's not an Israeli-Arab anything, which is exactly the mantra that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood like Qatar, like Erdogan, and so on, they are regurgitating this kind of mantra.
Khamenei just said recently, didn't he, the supreme leader of Iran, he said if all of the Muslims in the world got together and defeated Israel, it wouldn't be able to do this.
But that's exactly what they're trying to do, isn't it? Why did they begin with Israel first? Because it's so easy to galvanize support and antagonism against that. And they knew that. All they needed to do is speak about Al-Aqsa. Not for nothing did the Hamas call the completely irrelevant attack on the south of Israel, which has nothing to do with Al-Aqsa or Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa flood, being very far away from Al-Aqsa. They know that this word sort of brings about very emotive kind of responses from the Muslim world. But that's what the Islamic Republic wants. That's what Qatar wants. Why don't we frame it correctly? I mean, these radicals have already infiltrated into the West. One can see it. We've just spoken about the leadership of France bowing down to the will of radicals and Islamists in their own country and changing their policies de facto. Same is happening in the UK. Actually, what does this have to do with the Palestinian statehood that thousands and thousands of Muslims pray in the street, blocking main roads, while there's so many mosques around, and hitting and hurting and attacking Brits that are not Jewish, they're not pro-Israeli necessarily, but they are talking about taking over London and the UK. What does the demonstration in France calling down with France have to do with Palestinian statehood? The infiltration of the radicalism into Islamic radicalism, and one should not be afraid to say it, into the West is very prevalent, and we should frame it correctly. That is the war, the radical Islam against the West, because of the Iranian Islamic Republic and countries like Qatar.
All right. Ruth Wasserman-Land, thank you very much indeed. Well, a reminder of why Israel is fighting this war with Hezbollah. Tens of thousands of Israelis have been displaced from their homes in the north for almost a year. And as Hezbollah expands the reach of its missile attacks, some are finding themselves displaced for a second or even a third time. More in this report.
You feel like a refugee when you stay in a hotel in a small place with the children and with this stress. It's I don't know if someone can understand it when you don't have your privacy and nothing for almost a year.
On October 7th, Oren Kakun packed a light bag and evacuated his family from their home in Shlomi, around 1 mile from the Lebanon border, fearing a similar cross-border attack would be carried out by Hezbollah in the north, like the one on southern Israel by Hamas.
It's like they took you and take your heart out of your home. Now, we need maybe to do, yes. It's here. You will hear it now. Where is it? It's over our head. It's happened often. It's happened in the middle of the night, in the start of the morning, in 5 a.m. It's happened, and we run from the bed, and we need to get into the shelter, and a lot of stress and everything. You heard it.
Now, almost a year later, he and his 2 children are still moving from hotel to hotel, unable to return home due to the threat of Hezbollah rocket attacks, a situation which some 60,000 Israelis are currently experiencing.
My son is 21 years old, and my daughter is 15, and it's very difficult in this age for them and to me. We don't have this privacy.
The 59-year-old IT worker and his family have been sharing a bungalow in a seaside hotel just 15 kilometers, or 10 miles, away from their rocket-damaged home since April. But in recent days, some of the heaviest cross-border exchanges of fire have taken place since hostilities flared last October, Hezbollah vowing to fight until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. And with the expansion of Hezbollah rockets' range, even their temporary shelter has been threatened. On Monday, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Israel's campaign would continue until northern residents could return to their homes. The Israeli Air Force then launching more than 1,600 airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon.
I don't see any solution except get into Lebanon. You can't trust them. You can't trust them. You can't trust the UN. You can't trust no one. We need to take care of our safety.
Though the ongoing escalation in the region worries him and his children, Oren hopes that Israel's latest operations will weaken Hezbollah enough to make the border towns safe.
I think we see a little bit light, that we attack seriously Hezbollah. We show them that we want to go back home. And this is what we see now. The strength of the IDF, that wasn't there in the 7th of October. All of us are hopefully that it will be until we get safe again. We want peace. This is what we want, to live quiet.
The mayor of New York City has been indicted on allegations he received illegal campaign donations from Turkey. Eric Adams, a strong supporter of Israel, insists he's innocent and says he will fight the charges. More in this report from Emma Siegel.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams is facing criminal charges after being indicted on Wednesday by a grand jury. While details about the charges have not been revealed, sources say they are in connection to allegations that the Turkish government illegally donated funds to the mayor's electoral campaign in exchange for approval of the Turkish consulate in New York. Adams, a Democrat who was elected mayor 3 years ago, recorded a video message Wednesday night denying any wrongdoings.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes. If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit. If I'm charged, I know I am innocent.
According to the New York Times, prosecutors have subpoenaed the campaign and the mayor's office for information related to 5 other countries: Israel, Qatar, China, South Korea, and Uzbekistan. But it remains unclear why investigators are seeking information about these additional countries and what Adams' connections to them are. Adams has strong ties to the New York Jewish community and is a staunch supporter of Israel, having both visited the state and hosted Israeli President Isaac Herzog in New York. The mayor has been facing a flurry of calls to resign from fellow Democrats, calls that he says he will defy.
Now, if I am charged, many may say I should resign because I cannot manage the city while fighting the case. I can also understand how everyday New Yorkers will be concerned that I cannot do my job while I face accusation. Make no mistake, you elected me to lead this city, and lead it I will.
Adams' tenure has been marred by a slew of resignations by top city officials in recent weeks, as multiple federal corruption investigations embroil his administration. Federal prosecutors are expected to unseal the indictment on Thursday when Adams makes his initial court appearance.
Well, that's it for Middle East Now. Thank you very much indeed for watching, and do stay tuned to I24 News. Natasha Kurchuk is up next with the rundown. Good night.
Sale for the benefit of the victims of October 7th, 2023, supported by the Karen Hayazad. With renowned artists from all over the world on Monday, October 7th, 2024. View the complete catalog and access remote purchase orders on aspacefineart.com and Karen-Hayazad.fr.
I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and this is The Rundown. It is day 356 of the Israel-Hamas war, but the focus is on Israel's northern border. The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has approved the IDF continuing its offensive activity against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, this comes amid another targeted assassination attempt in the Lebanese capital of Beirut for the fourth time in just a week. At the same time, Hezbollah continues its strikes on northern Israel, and the United States and France have proposed a 3-week ceasefire in an attempt to avoid a wider war. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has the details.
Another targeted Israeli airstrike in Hezbollah's Beirut stronghold, its fourth in a week. The IDF said it eliminated Mohammed Hossein Srour, commander of Hezbollah's aerial forces. The Lebanese Health Ministry said 2 people were killed in the strike. Hezbollah did not comment. Throughout Thursday, Israel targeted dozens of Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. This included 8 crossings along the Syria-Lebanon border used by Hezbollah to transfer weapons. Dozens of people were killed across Lebanon, according to local authorities, including 23 people in a building housing Syrian families.
Lebanon today is victim to an enemy that is using electronic, cyber, sea and air attacks against us that could turn into a ground attack and set the stage for an all-out regional war. I hope to return to my country armed with your explicit stance, calling for the cessation of this aggression out of respect for the sovereignty and safety of my country.
Meanwhile, the terror group that has undermined Lebanon's sovereignty fired dozens of rockets at communities in the upper and western Galilee. There were no injuries. In some areas, the alert only comes after the rockets hit. Amid tensions of a wider escalation, the IDF wrapped up another drill, simulating a ground offensive in Lebanon.
We have entered a new phase of the campaign, and we are now in Operation Northern Arrows. The operation began with a significant blow to Hezbollah's capabilities, focusing on their firepower capabilities, and a very significant hit on the organization's commanders and operatives. Facing this, we need to change the security situation. We must be fully prepared for maneuvers and action.
In an attempt to avoid such a scenario, the United States and France and some of their allies issued a proposal for an immediate ceasefire.
A diplomatic solution is indeed possible. In recent days, we've worked with our American partners on a temporary ceasefire platform of 21 days to allow for negotiations. We are counting on both parties to accept it without delay in order to protect civilian populations and allow for diplomatic negotiations to begin.
Reports of an expected ceasefire in the coming hours were received with anger from right-wing coalition members and northern mayors, calling it, quote, a fatal mistake. This prompted the Netanyahu government to deny the reports, saying Israel will continue to fight Hezbollah with full force.
The reports about a ceasefire being already agreed are not accurate. The Prime Minister's reiterated that, yes, of course, Israel is open to diplomacy, as we have been. It's always our go-to option. But Israel has yet to respond to this particular American-French proposal.
But Lebanese civilians are not waiting for diplomacy, with hundreds of thousands evacuating southern Lebanon. However, they weren't always met with open arms. Residents of North Lebanon's Tripoli forced evacuees from southern Lebanon to tear pro-Hezbollah and Nasrallah stickers off their cars as they entered the predominantly Sunni city. Also in eastern Lebanon, Zahle, locals of the majority Christian city in the Bekaa Valley were seen kicking out evacuees from the south. A clear indication that not all Lebanese are rallying around Hezbollah in its escalating war against Israel.
Let's turn to our guests in the studio. Joining us now is Colonel in the Reserves, Dr. Jacques Neria, the former Deputy Head of Assessment of the Israeli Military Intelligence, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran. All right, so, let's talk about the assassination today. Following the assassination of Hezbollah's aerial forces chief, should we expect a larger response from Hezbollah than what we have been seeing today, which we have obviously been seeing multiple barrages, but is there going to be something bigger?
as important as Mohammed Hussein Sul was for the ranks of Hezbollah, his elimination is not what's going to send Hezbollah over the edge. I agree that Hezbollah and its backers in Tehran, these are decisive moments for them, decisive days, as they have to make a decision, because they cannot continue too long in this current situation where Israel's pummeling them blow after blow at a full-scale war-like pace, whereas they're continuing in this war of attrition pace pretty much that hasn't changed over the past week or so, 2 weeks, whereas Israel has changed its tactics. And so with Israel further degrading Hezbollah's capabilities, whether it's command and control like we saw today, or further targeting Hezbollah's launch capabilities, its rocket and missile caches, and its ground forces in southern Lebanon, eventually it'll reach a point where it's no longer cost effective for them to maintain the current trajectory, and they'll have to make a decision whether to match Israel's fast-paced, high-intensity strikes, basically moving to a full-out war, or to take the diplomatic avenue. And but that's not a decision that Nasrallah is going to make on its own.
Right? Because we're talking about a 21-day ceasefire that was put on the table with Hezbollah. We, quite honestly, when you look at just kind of the overall picture here, why would Israel have any incentive to agree to a deal like that, knowing that Hezbollah has
Somebody woke up in Washington. Somebody woke up after 11 months. 11 months. I mean, we've been pounded by Hezbollah. We've been attacked by Hezbollah. Our houses were destroyed in the north. Our kibbutzim were just emptied by the people, evacuated. And nobody thought of asking for a ceasefire. Even the French didn't ask for a ceasefire. They went several times to Lebanon. They were busy with electing a president in Lebanon. And then they sent Hochstein, and who gave us, the fantastic plans about how to settle the area between us and Lebanon by bringing an idea, an ingenious one, 15,000 soldiers, Lebanese soldiers, from where? I don't know from where, to put them in South Lebanon. So this is what we had. And the Lebanese government, 11 months, did they ask once Hezbollah to stop attacking Israel? No. Now suddenly, because we attacked Hezbollah, the terrorist organization who's been firing at us more than 8,000 rockets on Israel, they were the ones who ran to the United States and to the Security Council. This is crazy.
All right, we're going to continue this. I promise you, we're just going to turn quickly to northern Israel, where our correspondent Zach Anders is joining us live. Zach, what is the latest, and how much rocket fire have we seen today in Israel compared to the past couple of days?
Yeah, a considerable drop-off, although within the last 2 hours, some 40 rockets launched again into the Safad direction. That has seen quite a bit of firepower along with the Western Galilee, those communities north of Haifa along the coastline, seeing quite a bit. They did again this morning at 10 a.m., some 45 rockets launched. Then we only have, remarkably, and over the last several days, I've just been stunned by the casualty count on the Israeli side, it being incredibly low with the amount of rocket fire that is coming in, potentially speaking to how many of the folks up here are adhering to the Home Front Command guidelines, which have not changed, still urging folks even outside the evacuation zone to stay near a shelter. But we only have one injury today from Israel's ambulance service, MADA, saying a 45-year-old man was lightly wounded by shrapnel here in the north. We continue to see this rocket fire, but I think what was most remarkable, Natasha, was that 18-hour window from 3 o'clock yesterday until 10 a.m. this morning, when we didn't record any red alerts and there weren't any registered attacks. I've been speaking with the IDF. They say there were attacks, but none that crossed into Israeli territory. They were right there along the border, and that correlates with what Hezbollah was claiming on their own channels, that they were firing with artillery. We don't know, exactly what that means when Hezbollah says artillery. They don't have those kind of big pieces that you would see deployed in the field or deployed on the Israeli side, potentially mortars or smaller projectiles that could be launched by crews on the ground. But the 18-hour window with no considerable rocket or drone fire, and I'm hearing from the IDF side, they believe that there has been a serious blow dealt to Hezbollah's ability to be able to maneuver and launch some of these weapons, and that contributed to a slowdown and potentially shows that Hezbollah is somewhat in disarray, having a hard time recollecting themselves and being able to get to these positions and fire again. I think one of the reasons, too, we still see the roads just jam-packed with people trying to get north and get away from this fighting.
All right, Zach Anders joining us from the north of Israel. We're going to be back with you later in the show. Thank you for that update. We know that Magen David Adom, Israel's emergency services, are saying that they're now treating a 45-year-old man who was moderately wounded by shrapnel in an attack not too long ago in the lower Galilee. That's the latest we have in terms of updates, and that today Hezbollah has launched more than 175 rockets at northern Israel. So Zach essentially said that Hezbollah's firepower seems to have been diminished pretty significantly, or at least there's perhaps fear on the part of the Hezbollah terror group to up the ante to a point that it can't return back from. So the question now that I have for both of you is whether or not that is true. Has Israel truly caused damage, enough damage to Hezbollah to pull back at this point?
The way I read the situation, Hezbollah maintains all of its capabilities that it had before, perhaps a few rockets, fewer. But if we're looking at, if we're trying to explain this current situation, I think what Israel has disrupted is its command and control abilities in the way that it hurts Hezbollah's ability to carry out attack after attack after attack along the border at a similar pace that it did until now. That does not mean it has less fighters, and it does not mean it has less rockets. It does have less rockets, but not in a level that would reduce its fire pace against Israel. We would expect that they ramp up their attacks against Israel to match what the blows that Israel is delivering. But I just want to circle back to your question.
Ceasefire. Yeah.
Is Hezbollah going to agree to it? No one's asking Hezbollah to agree to it because according to the text, Hezbollah, the word Hezbollah doesn't appear in this proposal. It's between Israel and Lebanon. The situation between Israel and Lebanon. The situation on the Israel-Lebanese border. This is the world, the international community de facto normalizing the situation in which a terror organization commandeers a sovereign state and acts on its behalf, but has no responsibility, has no accountability to its actions. Why does the Lebanese I know why the Lebanese government has to be held accountable, because they're the sovereign state, but no one is holding Hezbollah accountable, and no one is really asking the Lebanese government to be accountable for Hezbollah's acts. It's as if Hezbollah is non-existent in this current situation, and Israel is at war with Lebanon. The Lebanese military hasn't fired a single shot over the past 11 months, but yet Israel is required to reach a ceasefire with the Lebanese government. And this is really the international community remiss in its responsibility to defend sovereign states and to prevent terror organizations from continuously commandeering states and acting on their behalf.
All right, so we know that since 2006, despite the ceasefire deal that was made at the time between Israel and Lebanon, ending the 2006 war, that Hezbollah was supposed to pull its troops back past the Litani River, 10 miles north of the border with, or 10 kilometers north of the border with the state of Israel. And we know that basically on day one that didn't happen. The question is, at what point would Hezbollah have any incentive to actually change its behavior on the ground? And a ceasefire like this that is being suggested that would last for 21 days long, obviously, what benefit would that have to the state of Israel?
Well, first of all, 1701 was not an agreement a deal between Israel and Lebanon. It was a Security Council resolution that was imposed and accepted by both sides. And according to that resolution, Hezbollah was supposed to withdraw from the south of Lebanon. Instead, the day after, he began deploying once again. And I think that the Israeli government made the biggest mistake not to intervene at that point, not to hit back at Hezbollah, who was trying to establish himself again in the south of Lebanon. And because of that, Israel chose to feed the beast, and we got a monster. This is what we got a month after 18 years, where he has managed to dig every centimeter of land in South Lebanon, transforming it into attack tunnels, into fortifications, into labyrinths, into the positions, and hiding all the weapons. He chose to hide all his weapons, main weapons, inside civilian houses, civilian villages. And this is what we are meeting right now. So I think that for your question, is his capacity degraded? The question is, we'll have to wait, because after the shock of those 2 weeks, Hezbollah has begun responding, and he has been expanding the fire to new areas that we didn't see in the past. But he is very much careful not to expand it beyond, in order not to provoke Israel into a land incursion.
All right, we're going to come back to you both shortly. We're turning now to the United States. The Israeli Prime Minister has taken off for New York City this morning ahead of a planned address to the United Nations General Assembly. And local authorities are already bracing for more protests against Israel throughout his short visit, which is expected to last until Saturday. Well, joining us now is our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. Mike, what is Netanyahu expected to say at the UNGA?
By the way, some of those protesters are already outlining the street here. They mistakenly thought that Netanyahu was addressing the General Assembly today instead of tomorrow. But in any case, I think our guest in studio could have wrote a large portion of the Prime Minister's speech for tomorrow. Listen, I think he'll make a couple cases here tomorrow. Number one, that Israel is wounded, but it's still standing even after the hit of October 7th. And look what it's done to the Hezbollah chain of command, basically wiping it out, minus Nasrallah. Basically a don't tread on me type aspect that I think Netanyahu will be pushing tomorrow. And secondly, I think it'll be largely a condemnation of the failures of the United Nations and the international community to condemn Hamas for its October 7th massacre, to implement Security Council resolutions vis-a-vis Hezbollah in Lebanon, and failing to hold those two entities, both the terror group in Hezbollah and the Lebanese armed forces and the government, to account, to make sure those resolutions were implemented, so we didn't arrive to a situation we were arriving at today. And I think he'll take to task the leadership of the United Nations, maybe not directly, but at least implicitly, in Secretary General Antonio Guterres, for only showing this deep alarm and deep concern that he tends to show only when Israel strikes back, only when Israel has finally had enough of thousands of rockets raining down on its territory for months and years at a time, and when it finally pulls the trigger back on its enemies, suddenly the UN issues its condemnations. I think it'll be geared to certainly his domestic audience, which is most important to Netanyahu, but I think he'll touch upon the global aspects of what's happening right now in the Middle East and its repercussions if the international community doesn't step forward and take charge a little bit more.
Now, I understand that you spoke with a critical ally of Israel who also has warming ties with Iran. Can you tell us about that?
That's correct. Hungary's foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, Hungary obviously a staunch ally of Israel, one of its few true friends here at the United Nations, but also has a burgeoning, largely economic relationship with Iran. I talked to Foreign Minister Szijjártó here at the UN yesterday to get his take on exactly how that balancing act works and if Hungary could actually sometime mediate between Israel and Iran if the occasion called for it. Here is Peter Szijjártó, the Hungarian foreign minister.
I think it can be useful if Hungary, a Central European country, currently the rotating presidency of the European Union, can have a reach out to Iran as well and can talk to the Iranians. Our relationship is mostly based on practical things like economic cooperation, trade cooperation, and it is obvious that in many issues, we see the world in a totally different way. We see the developments, we see the challenges in a totally different way. But it's not only Iran, but all the countries in the world. What I'm going to tell you now is that we, even if we don't agree in anything, we still prefer the channels of communication to be kept open than keeping them closed.
Partners that might otherwise be on opposite sides of an issue. Does Hungary have any desire to go into the mix here and try to bridge gaps between Israel and Iran if it's eventually asked to do so, seeing that you seem to have good relationships with each country?
Well, it depends only on one thing, rather two. Whether the two countries want us to do so. So in case there's an outreach from both sides asking us to do the job, we would be happy to do so. But so far, no such kind of a request came.
All right, Mike, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and giving us that soundbite from the Hungarian foreign minister. We are going to be turning now to the families of the hostages still being held captive in the Gaza Strip. As the fighting escalates between Israel and Hezbollah, it almost feels like the war in Gaza is no longer of interest to the international media. While hostage release and ceasefire talks appear to remain at a standstill, there are reportedly ongoing attempts all of the time to move hostage talks forward, according to a member of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's entourage. But Hamas chief Sinwar has been out of touch for weeks now. At this point, Israel does not believe that he's dead, but the lack of progress in making a deal has left the families of the 101 Israeli hostages who are still being held captive in Gaza in a state of limbo and even more desperation. Well, joining us now is Ilan Dalal. He's the father of Israeli hostage Guy Gilboa Dalal. Guy was taken hostage by Hamas terrorists from the Nova Music Festival. He actually turned 23 just a couple of months ago while in captivity. Ilan, to begin, what do you know about your son's condition at this point, if anything?
Well, I don't know anything about his condition. Last time we got some kind of sign, it was 9 months ago. Since then, we didn't receive any new signs. So what I know is that he went into Gaza on both feet, healthy and not wounded, and I hope that he's still that way.
How does your family feel about the escalating violence that we're seeing between Israel and Lebanon, and how it's going to impact the fight to get your son released from captivity?
Well, I don't think that Israel had any choice for going to this operation, because Nasrallah tied himself to Gaza and became the protector of Gaza. And since then, is bombing Israel for almost a year without a proper response. So now Israel is finally taking steps in order to make Hezbollah pay for everything he done, and hopefully that these steps will make the deal come faster, maybe.
What has the Israeli government been telling you in terms of what is happening with these negotiations? And do you feel that enough is really being done at this point to help your son and the other hostages?
Well, unfortunately, they're not saying anything to us. We're learning things from the media, and if we get any messages, it's after it was published on the media. So we don't get any new information from the government, and not about future plans, of course, and not about the current situation, which is obviously stuck.
Right. Well, obviously, the hope is that some type of ceasefire deal, like you mentioned, that could be made with Hezbollah would also somehow be connected to what we're seeing in the Gaza Strip at this point. But, you know, I just kind of want to hear what you want the world to do at this point, what message you want to send to our viewers who are watching today.
Well, you know why Israel went to this war. We didn't start it. Hamas on October 7 penetrated Israel, killed, murdered, burned, and raped people. He kidnapped 254 people, and we had to defend ourselves and bring our people back. And the North, Nasrallah decided to be the protector of the Palestinian people and try to help them win the war. And Israel didn't start it with Nasrallah. He came into this war, and now he's getting back what he deserves. And the world wants to stop us. I'd say to the world, don't pressure on Israel. Put the pressure on Hezbollah and Hamas. We are the victim here. the fact that we are strong and can hit back very strong, it doesn't say that you need to pressure us to stop. We need to get our hostages back. And as long as there are hostages in Gaza, the Gazans will not have peace. You must understand that.
Is there any message that you would want to send to your son right now if he's listening? We know that I-24 News has been heard in the Gaza Strip throughout the course of the war by other hostages as well.
Yeah, Guy, my beloved son, we love you so much and we miss you so much. I'm sorry that it's taking too long to get you out of there. I know that you must feel deserted, but you're not. Please keep your hope. We are not giving up on you for a second and doing everything we can in order to get you out of there. And I hope that soon we'll be together again. So keep in there.
Ilan, you know, I just have to say that we are thinking about your family. We're praying for you, just hoping that you're going to have that beautiful moment reuniting with your son. Incredibly difficult what your family has been enduring throughout this time. And the hope is that we are going to see some type of positive change forward soon. But thank you so much for joining us and telling us your story and sharing your voice.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like we are out for a quick commercial break. We're going to be back shortly here on The Rundown, so do not go anywhere. We have a lot coming up, and you're not going to want to miss it. I'm Natasha Kirchak. This is The Rundown. We'll see you shortly.
Sale for the benefit of the victims of October 7th. (2023) on a-hayassad.fr.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
the rundown. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for sticking with us. Well, as fighting escalates between Israel and Hezbollah, the Lebanese health ministry says that more than 550 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes across Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah military infrastructure and personnel. Now, the Lebanese government has not specified how many of those killed are Hezbollah operatives or civilians, but the IDF insists that its attacks are targeted and that civilian casualties are only a result of Hezbollah embedding itself within civilian areas. So what is the extent of the damage so far, and what do Lebanese citizens want to see happen next? Well, joining us now is David Daoud. He's a Hezbollah in Lebanon senior fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. So, David, what do we know about these numbers, and how many of them are Hezbollah combatants in terms of the casualties that we've been seeing in Lebanon so far?
Thank you, as usual, for having me on. I think it's an excellent question. Look, the Ministry of Health in Lebanon is not the Ministry of Health in Gaza. It's run by Firas Abiad, who's a Sunni Muslim. He's a member of the Future movement. And to date, for the past 11 months, the Lebanese Health Ministry has been pretty accurate in identifying both the number and the identity of the casualties. There is a caveat here, and that is that in these strikes that Israel launched during the 1,600 target blitz, Hezbollah did not release a name of a single combatant that was killed, which strikes me as suspicious, considering the intensity of the strikes on Hezbollah's infrastructure and in the areas where Hezbollah is largely situated. But that does not mean that the 500 number that the Lebanese Health Ministry is inaccurate or exaggerated.
How widespread is the infrastructural damage that we are seeing in Lebanon so far?
It's very much localized to the areas where Hezbollah itself is concentrated and where its support base is concentrated. These are otherwise civilians, but Hezbollah has embedded itself, its military infrastructure and its personnel among these civilians, in many cases in their homes. Homes will double as arsenals and weapon storages. So the damage has been widespread in these areas, but it's very much localized to them. You're not seeing that damage, say, in predominantly Sunni areas of Beirut that are, hundreds of yards or a couple of kilometers away from, say, South Beirut, where Hezbollah maintains a stronghold.
What are we hearing from the Lebanese public on all of this? Is there anger towards Hezbollah for concentrating its military infrastructure in civilian areas, or simply with Israel?
I think it's hard to speak of a Lebanese public in a unified sense. I think it depends. Again, let's start with the fact that Hezbollah has considerable support from segments of the Lebanese public, particularly among the Shiite population. A statistic that I like to recall is that Hezbollah won 356,000 votes in the last parliamentary election out of almost 2.5 million eligible voters. A Washington Institute poll came out earlier this year that showed that 89% of Lebanese Shia have strongly favorable views of Hezbollah. And it's not just Lebanese Shiites. So I would say it depends on who you're asking. It depends on the environment. Some sides may be angry at both. Some sides may direct their anger just at Israel, and some sides may blame entirely Hezbollah. But there's no way to really speak of a unified Lebanese voice.
All right. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, David Daoud. Very interesting to hear your insight on this. I'm sure we'll have you back soon. We are going to turn now to Hezbollah and its firepower. Yesterday, Hezbollah launched, for the first time in history, a ballistic missile towards Israel's center, making it a demonstration of the group's firepower as the IDF prepares for a possible ground incursion. Our Fabio Shapiro delves into the group's capabilities in this report.
This week, Hezbollah shot its first ballistic missile at Tel Aviv, coming as the IDF upped its attacks against the terrorist group.
You hear the jets overhead. We have been striking all day. This is both to prepare the ground for your possible entry and to continue degrading Hezbollah. Today, Hezbollah expanded its range of fire, and later today, they will receive a very strong response. Prepare yourselves.
The missile launched is an escalation from the previous Hezbollah attacks. Since October 8th, the group has mainly used rockets to attack northern Israel, launching an estimated 8,000. But the Iranian proxy possesses a large variety of firepower,
including long-range cruise missiles, heavyweight rocket with 1,000 kilo warhead. This is the same type of rocket that was used in the Majd al-Shams attack that killed 12 innocent children. We also struck a short and medium range rockets and UAVs, all capable of attacking deep inside Israeli territory and causing major damage to civilian towns and cities.
The IDF and the CIA estimate that beside around 50,000 combatants, Hezbollah has an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets, capable of hitting all areas of Israel. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that the terror group has over 100,000 short and long-range rockets, over 20,000 short-range unguided ballistic missiles, over 150 short-range guided ballistic missiles, and over 10 intermediate-range unguided ballistic missiles, making its capabilities 20 to 33 times larger than Hamas's, besides having a longer range of reach. But it seems both terror groups have a similar way of storing their firepower.
In these images, you can see how Hezbollah hides long-range rockets with range of hundreds of kilometers inside the attic of a house in the heart of Khumin al-Takhta village in southern Lebanon. You can see here that the rocket is stored on an hydraulic system and is prepared for a launch out of an opening in the roof, directed at the communities in northern Israel. And more than that, under this attic, a family lives and serves as a human shield for Hezbollah.
Much of this military growth is linked to Hezbollah's main supporter and weapons supplier, Iran, which provides the group with new missile systems such as their Almas-3 anti-tank missile, but also providing guidance systems to upgrade Hezbollah's older systems. The IDF claimed to have hit over 1,600 Hezbollah targets in Lebanon in the last few days, many of them rocket and missile storage facilities. Reports from Israel's Channel 12 claim that the strikes resulted in the destruction of over 50% of Hezbollah capabilities, but military sources believe this is an exaggeration. The IDF said it could not verify the percentages and the data given by the network. Yet, many believe the blow was a significant one.
A few words about the enemy. Hezbollah today is not the same Hezbollah we knew a week ago. It has suffered a sequence of blows to its command and control, its fighters, and the means to fight. These are all severe blows. I trust the IDF and everything it does, and we have more strikes ready.
As Israel already sees the possibility of a ground invasion into Lebanon as a reality, and over 60,000 Israelis await to return home, a much larger challenge can be expected on the way to southern Lebanon's Litani River.
I'd like to turn now to our guests in the studio, Colonel in the Reserve Dr. Jacques Neria and our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran. All right, now the IDF says that it has struck over 1,600 Hezbollah targets in Lebanon so far. That number actually came out about 2 days ago, so assuming that it's even higher at this point. But what kind of damage are we actually seeing? Have they been able to successfully take out some of the longer-range ballistic missiles, for example, that Israelis are the most worried about?
To start with the latter part of your question, my understanding is they have not yet significantly targeted those long-range missiles, because those long-range missiles are Iran's security policy. In an event where Israel were to target Iranian nuclear facilities on Iranian soil, these long-range ballistic missiles are expected to be the second strike capability for Iran, so to speak. Israel has this reportedly on nuclear submarines. This is Iran doesn't have a nuclear submarine on the coast of Israel, at least to the best of our knowledge, so it places them in Lebanon. Now, what does it mean when Israel strikes a Hezbollah target? It can mean a wide variety of things. It can mean a rocket launcher. It can mean a military compound, a training facility, a weapons depot. And on that, just over these past few moments, visuals coming out of Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, El Hermel area, that's the northern part of the Bekaa Valley. That is where Hezbollah stores the vast majority of its big storage facilities, not these local hiding a few rockets a few launchers in homes. This is where they have their big storage facilities, and that explains why we could see in these visuals right now on the screen the secondary explosions. Those explosions that we see, those fireworks, that's a result of munitions exploding following the strike by Israeli fighter jets. And so we have seen these kind of secondary explosions among the targets that Israel has been striking over these past 2 weeks in higher intensity. But again, it does not mean that all the 1,600 are rockets, are launchers, or have anything to do with the launch capabilities, because Hezbollah has a wide array of threats posed at Israel.
One remark about it. In the Second Lebanese War, Israel attacked Lebanon, and the targets, the first targets were the long-range missiles. And it took a long time to understand that this firepower was eliminated. And Hassan Nasrallah was lying all the time, saying, we will hit beyond Haifa, beyond Hadera, we'll reach Tel Aviv, and he didn't reach it all. So we don't know exactly.
Until yesterday.
Yeah, we know what is the scope of the attacks, and where are those missiles deployed, in fact, or hidden inside tunnels, as we've seen that there are tunnels that join between the Bekaa Valley to the coast of Lebanon. I mean, huge works that have been done by Hezbollah in those 18 years. In any case, what is interesting that I noticed yesterday is the fact that the IDF targeted Hezbollah targets inside Christian areas like Ras Osta, Muaysara, Jbeil, which is Byblos, the famous Byblos. This is quite special. I mean, we couldn't imagine that inside Christian territory, the Shiites would put and deploy weapons. And
what is the messaging there?
And the message is very clear now for why the Christians are very voicey about don't drag us into war, because disaster will happen in our areas. So now we know why, because they know of this presence of Hezbollah in their areas.
All right. Well, I'd like to move on right now to another issue that Israel is facing. Can Israel's economy survive an all-out war with Hezbollah in Lebanon? That is a question that many Israelis are now asking themselves as international airlines begin canceling even more flights once again. Tourism to Israel is at an all-time low, and now even more parts of northern Israel are shutting down amid major fire from the Hezbollah terror group. For local business owners, it is a total nightmare. The agricultural sector is flailing amid a major labor shortage, and the direct expenses of the war so far are assessed at almost $50 billion from the last quarter of 2023 to the end of 2024. Well, joining us now is economy expert Dr. Alex Coman. So, Alex, can Israel's economy survive an all-out war with Hezbollah? What will the cost be?
The economy is not going to be the bottleneck. Israel's economy can support that for a simple reason that Israel has an impeccable record of paying back its debts. So there's an infinite flow of credit that's available to Israel. This said, it's going to be extremely expensive because we will have to pay very high interest rates on that because our credit rating has declined and will keep declining. But we will for the foreseeable future be able to receive credit from abroad. So I do not, and also help from the US. So I do not see the economy being the straw that will break the camel's back in this context.
What should be the biggest issues of concern for Israelis at this point when it comes to their wallets?
The major problem is the Smotrich, the Minister of Finance. He's not willing to tighten the belt. He's not willing to stop spending money on his own coalition. He's not willing to really shut down unnecessary, redundant, ridiculous government ministries. So his target is basically the people who work. So we are the camels that he has been bleeding in the past, and he's accelerating the rate of bleeding. So he's talking about our savings. He's talking about our taxes. So savings, he's going to tax us. Tax ranks are not going to go up, so we'll pay more taxes in spite of the inflation. So it's basically is very, very focused on that same population, people who work. People who do not work, namely, for instance, religious or Hasidim families, they are not going to carry the burden. They're not going to feel that. And in particular, one of the most painful issues is daycare centers. Daycare centers, he insists on subsidizing them for religious people who do not serve in the army, which is against the law, while people who are working are paying incredibly, almost doubling the price for those daycare centers for families that are working.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us, giving us some insight as to the current economic situation. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what plays out between Israel and Hezbollah, just how intense the fighting becomes. So I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I'd also like to thank our guests in the studio for joining us throughout the entire rundown. We're going to turn now to a pretty interesting interview here. One of the biggest advocates for Israel and against Hamas is the son of one of the founders of the Palestinian terror group decades ago. Musab Hassan Youssef, who's also known as the Green Prince, is now taking his cause around the world to share his firsthand knowledge about Hamas's savagery and violent ideology. And last week, Youssef was speaking to various communities in Madrid, and our Emily Francis had the opportunity to speak with him at Bose Media Studios in the Spanish capital of Madrid. Let's have a listen.
Was the charter a precursor to what happened on October 7th, or did it just become more radical?
Hamas charter, let's say it was a theory. October 7 is the manifestation of that theory. In theory, my father and his friends thought that by annihilating Israel, they are going to achieve peace. And that's their delusion. To actually believe that they are the sword of God on earth, that only the Muslims are going to heaven and the rest of the world going to hell. Hence, they function as the sword of Allah on earth, butchering people, brutalizing people, trying to dominate other societies, enslave humanity.
So, when October 7th happened, were you surprised?
Look, I'm not surprised by Hamas brutality. I witnessed their brutality firsthand when I was back in prison in 1996. And in total, I spent some 2 years with Hamas in prison. And even though Hamas gave me lots of privileges, protection, status, security, I start asking myself the question, what if Hamas achieved their goal of establishing their state? What they're going to do with it? Because their brutality in prison, torturing our own people. Imagine just like any criminal prison where, you know, the gangs are taken over and they're like gangs within the prison, bullying other prisoners, killing them, torturing them, etc. And that took place during the time I was in prison, where hundreds of Palestinian prisoners were tortured on the hands of Hamas. Many of them died.
How is it so insidious, the propaganda?
Well, Hamas is not doing the propaganda. Hamas used civilians as a weapon. They intentionally sacrificed civilians, children, for political and financial gain. And they knew that the useful idiots around the world would do the job on their behalf, from the river to the sea. Some of them are not aware that they are calling for ethnic cleansing of a human race. Very dangerous ideologies. The ones who are doing the propaganda, not the Hamas people, mostly Westerners, and mostly the Palestinian Authority with the European money and the American taxpayer money, where they have a big operation around the globe. Their delegations, their ambassadors, their embassies have been working around the clock to delegitimize Israel. Many people in the West who don't understand this death culture when they saw the death of the children, and many of it is not even true. It was not even in Gaza, some of it from Syria, some of it from other locations, some of it even from earthquake disasters. When they saw the rescue teams taking children and civilians from beneath the rubble, and they just put on it Gaza, this became like...
So not all of those were even in Gaza?
Absolutely not, and many of it is artificial intelligence. Many of it is not even real.
So at what age do you learn in school, or what age to hate Israel and that Israel needs to be wiped off the map?
The indoctrination begins at very young age, and that's part of the abuse. The hatred against the Jewish people is one of the main or most significant reasons behind this conflict. And I think this is a very, very dangerous aspect of the Middle Eastern culture that is not concerned of life, this life on earth. It's concerned more of the afterlife. And when the children are forced to believe, not in this life, in the other life, for any stupid reason, it's a disease. And it's a psychological defect. If I have compassion in this whole situation, it's only towards the children, actually, because the children are forced to carry the burden of their fathers, forefathers, ancestors, and I think this is a crime. This does not mean that the children don't dream to become engineers and doctors and movie stars. Every child has an amazing dream, but the question is the environment allowing them to thrive and to achieve their dreams? What's known as Palestine is a black hole. It can swallow an entire galaxy, and nothing can satisfy it. I am totally against this false identity to begin with. Then I'm against the Palestinian ideology, because both stand for violence and both depend on the destruction of something that is actually existing and is real.
Do you believe they'll ever release the hostages? They'll ever agree to a deal?
Look, the hostage situation, such a complicated situation, could be the most complicated case in our modern history. We have savages, terrorists, who connected their fate to the fate of innocent people. The hostages were taken from their living rooms, from their backyards. Infants, Holocaust survivors, decent citizens who were just living peacefully in their houses. So on one hand, the IDF say we must eradicate Hamas and remove them from power. On the other hand, Hamas say, listen, if you do that, the hostages would die. And they want Israel to be blamed for the death of the hostages. Israel, and even I include myself, I say we, as civilized people, we cannot allow Hamas savages to get away with their crime. First of all, surrendering to the will of savages. Second, to take legitimacy and sit on the negotiating table begging for the release of the hostages where Hamas keep them deep under the ground. Of course, the situation is very obvious why Hamas did that. But now I'm afraid that Sinwar and his gang want to sink the boat with everybody on it. I hope that we can reach a deal where they can take a safe passage and get the hell out. And if this was the price to rescue the hostages, then I think it's worth it. But I am not sure that this is even a possibility. So I hope that a miracle would happen a divine intervention would happen, that we will be able to release as many and rescue as many as we can.
Toda rabah.
Thank you.
All right, that is it for now on The Rundown. Thank you so much for joining us, but don't go anywhere. We're going to be back soon with continued rolling coverage of the ongoing Israel-Hamas war and the latest updates in the region, of course, with a special focus on the escalated fighting that we're seeing now between Israel and Hezbollah, the terror group out of Lebanon. I'm Natasha Kirchak. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.